Happy Elite Eight Day, everybody. Those who, I guess, celebrate it. It's the Elite Eight Day. Illinois will be facing off versus the number one seed UConn tonight at 6:09 in Boston. It's just, we go check out the reaction from when Illinois beat, in the Sweet 16 when they beat Iowa State. Great game. But Illinois is in the Elite Eight for the first time since 2005. 2004-2005 season. 8th grade, freshman year. I think that's when it happened. It's crazy. So we'll talk about that too, but we'll talk about the game. But make sure you like to subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow it right on Apple and iTunes and Spotify as well. Twitter's at Coach_Steve72. The other one is on X, not Twitter. The Coach Steve Show on X too. Everything else, check out the links below. Okay, so it's game day. Illinois is facing off against UConn, who is the best team in the country by statistic standards. They are the two best offensive teams in the entire country, which is crazy to think. Right now, UConn is -8.5 according to this ESPN one. I don't know. They're a little different. It's crazy in Illinois when you're on FanDuel or DraftKings, you cannot bet on teams in Illinois, or college teams in Illinois, I should say. It's a little crazy, so I don't get to see really that. So -8.5. The over is 155 according to this. The part of you wants to take the over on it because if Illinois is going to score 80-some points a game, and so is UConn, you're looking at, but that's 154. Money line for Illinois is plus 350, so not a lot of love for Illinois, but I mean, you can't blame them. Cannot blame them versus this. UConn is on a tear right now. Preview for this coming in. Like I said, -8.5, over under is 155. UConn and Big East play is 21-2. Their record is 13-1 versus non-conference opponents. They're averaging 81.6 points a game, but they're outscoring their opponents by 18. So just because they're scoring those points, they are also holding teams to less points. Illinois are 17-6 in the Big Ten. They led all Big Ten in scoring at 84.2 points per game while shooting 47.5%. So they are a little bit outscoring UConn if you want to look at that. So overall, UConn averages 81.6 points per game, 8.4 more per game than Illinois, 73.2 if you took overall. Illinois has shot 47.5% from the field, 8.1% points greater than UConn's 39.4 shooting average. The top performer for UConn is Cam Spencer. He averages 2.5 made three-pointers per game, scoring 14.5 points. He shoots 44.1% from beyond the arc. Tristan Newton is averaging 15.3 points. He gets 6.8 rebounds and 6.1 assists over the past 10 games. And, of course, Terrence Shannon Jr. is averaging 23.5 points per game for Illinois. Luke Goody is averaging 1.3 three-pointers made in the last 10 games. Last 10 games, the UConn is 10-0. They're averaging 82 points per game, 40.6 rebounds, which is insane, 20.6 assists, 5.7 steals, and 5.3 blocks per game. And they're shooting almost 50% from the field. It's 49.8, so you might as well just call it 50 from the field. They're holding their opponents to 61 points so far, especially in this tournament. Illinois in the last 10 games are 9-1. They're averaging 85.4 points per game. They're getting 37 rebounds a game. They're getting 14.2 assists, 4 steals, 3.3 blocks. They're shooting 49.9% from the field. Their opponents, though, are scoring 76.7 points per game. So this game, a lot of statistical standards are very, very close. So kind of like how Illinois and Iowa State were very close, and I said in that pregame that it was going to be one of the best games to watch because they're so similar in certain aspects of the game. And UConn and Illinois, again, they're very similar in these aspects of this game. And the biggest statistic that's going to stick out to us is the giving up points per game. Illinois is giving up about 76, and then UConn in the last 10 games, especially when you look in the tournament, they're only giving up about 61. So that's the big difference. Now, you could look at the paths they had. It's pretty similar. We could sit there and say that UConn has not had a, you know, hard path in this tournament. I mean, I think that's fair to ask that question. What kind of path has UConn actually had in this tournament? They beat Stetson 91-52. Now, they did play Northwestern, who was decently good, but Northwestern was not healthy. They won 75-58. But again, this is just all talking through it. San Diego State is not a bad basketball team at all, because San Diego State beat UNAB, but only by 4. Yale had that big upset against Auburn, but then San Diego State comes in and takes care of business 85-57. UConn takes care of business 82-52. So it's either they're not having the most toughest of path that we thought, or they're actually that good, which I think it's both. I think their path hasn't been like the toughest, but you don't expect the toughest path when you are the number 1 seed. But they're also good. I mean, you're beating some of those teams, by 30 points. But I'm an Illinois fan, but the argument can be made, has Illinois had the toughest path? Morehead State, they won 85-69. And then DuQuoin, had that big upset against BYU. Well, then Illinois wins 89-63. Iowa State, played South Dakota State, Washington State. Those were the 2 toughest. And then we beat Iowa State 72-69, where I think more of the emphasis was put on defense. The more I watch highlights, the more I listen to people talk, the more I replay the game back in my head. The reason why maybe offense didn't score as much is because they knew they had to spend so much time on being physical on defense. So that way, if they do win, getting to play UConn, they'd have to be ready for that. So it's going to be an extremely tough game. UConn is extremely talented. When you watch them, they are very good at making extra passes. They are very good at driving to the basket, dinking and dunking it there to the rim. They are very good at boxing out. Obviously, they're getting 40 rebounds. But I think that even the announcer said Illinois would be one of the better teams to match up against UConn in this tournament, because they seem very similar when you look at different position groups and the size. Illinois has a very big basketball team, but in order to win against UConn, they're going to have to play that same physical style of defense that they played against Iowa State, and they're going to have to shoot better. Like, Domas is going to have to score. He cannot afford to only score his 2 to 4 points like he did the other night. And Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to do his thing. He's going to have to come in. I think he's going to have a career night. He scored 29. I think he's going to have to score 33-ish to 40-ish. But everybody just going to have to play their best game ultimately, but they have to somehow match it with their best defense. Now, UConn's going to play a lot more man than zone. I believe they're going to do all that stuff, but we also have to box out. So Illinois does have a chance, but it's just we cannot afford mistakes. We cannot afford turnovers. We cannot afford to give up big time rebounds versus UConn either. And I don't think Terrence Shannon Jr. cannot be the only one scoring. That's kind of my thoughts on that game. It's very simple. Now, the talk that I wanted to do on this, have that preview for the first few minutes, then very quickly go through the rest. I was watching my new friend Cody Del Mendo's podcast last night. He was talking about the Sweet 16 game. He brought up a very unique question, and it's a question I think that is worth discussing, is especially if Illinois wins tonight. If they win tonight to get to the Final Four and they beat UConn, which is one of the best, they're the defending national champions. Terrence Shannon Jr. is having a amazing career this year. Is it worth questioning or asking the question, would he go down as one of the greatest Illinois basketball players of all time, if not the greatest? Which he asked that question, and you really start to think about that. And I think it's worth asking and having that conversation, which before he said it, I don't know if I would ever have that conversation because of all the great Illinois players that have come through, especially during my time. I can't dismiss Darren Williams. I can't dismiss, D Brown holds, I think D Brown, if you grew up and watched him play live, especially during the run of the Final Four and the national championship, I think he was everybody's favorite player. There was no hating D Brown. James Augustine was one of my favorite players. It's an argument to have him in there. It's an argument about Ayo Dosunmu. Dimitri McKinney was a great shooter. Brandon Paul. There's these guys that have come through that have been really, really good players. Now, I'm not talking about what they've done later on, like the NBA. Like, we're not talking, oh, they're one of the greatest players because if you look at their NBA career, because that list can be kind of short, right? I mean, you can look at Brandon Cook and talk about his NBA career. We can talk about Darren Williams. D Brown's NBA career didn't go as long as he wanted it to. We can look at, Kendall Gill. Like, people forget about that from the Flying Illini. Like, we can look at that too. But what I'm talking about is college, like looking at the college game and what they've done, right? More arguments to me can be made for like D Brown, Darren Williams, Luther Head, Roger Powell, James Augustine, those players, because they led Illinois to Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, national championship game. The reason why I think you could sit here and say, I'm not necessarily saying Terrence Shannon Jr. is better than Ayo Dosunmu, because again, we have to take out the NBA from it because we haven't seen Terrence Shannon in the NBA, and I don't want to do that. You have to talk about college. Ayo Dosunmu, who had like a Kofi Coburn and everything else, they didn't get as far as Terrence Shannon has taken the team this year. Now, I know it's a team. Domas does a lot of things. Coleman Hawkins does a lot of things. But he's the guy, right? Like, I don't think there's an argument that he's the best player on the team. And he has taken this team farther than Ayo Dosunmu has. Now, we look at Ayo Dosunmu, one of the best Illinois players there is. I think he deserves to be on that list. He helped build the standard of Illinois, and that's kind of where we look at it, right? He came in as a freshman, helped build it, goes on to the NBA. People are going to sit there and say, well, Terrence Shannon Jr. started at Texas Tech first, then transfers to Illinois, so it's not fair to maybe put him in this conversation, especially when we look at like a Darren Williams, a D Brown. But times are different, right? Like, back then, the transfer portal was never a thing. Like, all that, you stayed where you were, right? Like, you built a team up from freshmen that really showed a coach's culture and standard when you brought those type of players in and built it up. But we have to look at this differently, right? Like, he was at Texas Tech for 3 years. Brad Underwood had kept relations with him. He's from Chicago, brought him in. But we have to look at the impact they've made, right? Like, D Brown and them made an impact later on in their careers. So I'm not necessarily saying that one is super better than the other, but the conversation, you have to start putting Terrence Shannon Jr. into that conversation, especially if they win tonight. Even if they don't win tonight, he'll still be, I think, labeled down as one of the greater Illini, but it also depends on your standards and how you look at it, because are you not going to put him in the conversation because he hasn't been at Illinois his entire career? That's an argument to be made, and I'm okay having that conversation, but look what he did last year, getting them into the tournament. I know they didn't go as far as we wanted, but then this year, dealing with the allegations towards him, he's very motivated, how he plays on defense, the explosiveness he has. I tweeted Brent Bielema, I'm like, can we get him on the football team? Because his explosiveness is just through the roof. The way he can change speeds at the drop of a hat. His shooting has gotten better. So the argument is, can you put him down? And I know people love stats, just love stats. So this year, when we look at, let's just talk about stats. We'll talk about stats. Here, give me 1 second. Okay. So when you pull up D Brown, he played 137 games, which is a lot. He averaged 13.2 points per game, 4.9 assists. He shot 42% from the field, 36% from three-point range, and was 72.5% free throw. Pretty good stats. We love to hear about stats, right? Darren Williams played 101 games. He averaged 11 points per game, 5.9 assists, which is pretty good. He shot 42% from the field, 37% from three-point range. He was a 68.5% free throw shooter. We're going to take it all the way back, and let's talk about Kendall Gill, who was he's arguably one of the greatest Illini players. He played 117 games, averaged 12 points per game, averaged 3 assists per game. He shot 50% from the field, 37% from three-point range. He averaged 2.8 rebounds per game. He shot 75.5% from the free throw line. One of my favorite players of all time is James Augustine. He played 137 games for Illinois. He got 10 points a game, 7.5 rebounds per game. He only got 1.1 assists, which I thought would be more. Shot 61% from the field, 68% free throw shooter. Yeah, I thought it was way more than that. Again, it just kind of tells you the team too, like the type of players they had on there. Did not shoot well from three. Did not shoot well. Wow, yeah, he played in all freshman. He got in 32 games. He started 29. So he, like I said, James Augustine was one of my favorite players. I mean, we could look at how he stats. He averaged 7 points and 9 points and 10 points and 13 points his senior year per game. So he scored 1,383 points per game for his career. Kendall Gill scored 1,409 points. Darren Williams scored 1,111 points. D. Brown scored 1,812 points. And so that's why these guys are up there. Another one of a favorite player for everybody was Roger Powell. He played 128 games. He averaged 9.2 points per game, shot 39% from three-point, 57% overall field goal. He was only a 66% free throw shooter. He had 1,178 points. Dimitri McCamey, which I know people are probably wondering why he's on the list. He was a good player for Illinois. He was a good shooter. He shot 42% from the field, 36% three-point range. He was a 71% free throw shooter, which is huge. He played in 139 games. He averaged 12.4 points per game. He scored 1,718 points, which is very impressive. So, again, a lot of these guys we forget about. Another one that I did not say was Luther Head. I think people really forget about him. Scored 10 points a game. Shot 47% from the field goal, 38% three, was a 75% free throw shooter, which is pretty good. He scored 1,295 points. Of course, Ayo Dosunmu. He only played in 90 games. Now, we got to remember part of it was COVID. He averaged 16.7 points per game. Ayo Dosunmu, and now I know he played less games. These guys are playing 128. But Ayo Dosunmu averaged more points per game for the Illinois than all those other guys that I just said. And all those other guys are some of the greatest Illinois basketball players of all time. He shot 47% from the field. He shot 34% from three. So he could shoot mid-range. He was a 75% free throw shooter. So right there, the argument right there could make it for Ayo Dosunmu that he's top Illinois player of all time. And in 3 seasons, scored 1,504 points. So it's fair to say that if he stayed for one more year for his senior year instead of going to the NBA, which you cannot blame him for going to the NBA, the argument could be made because he scored 442 points as a freshman, 498 as a sophomore, and then he scored 564 points as a senior. So it's not unfair to sit there and say that if he scored 480 points the next year, to score almost 1,900 to 2,000 points for Illinois. Like, that's pretty crazy to talk about when you look at compared to all those other guys I said, right? Because those are some of the greatest Illinois basketballers of all time that we all grew up with. It's absolutely insane. So now let's look at Terrence Shannon Jr.'s again. And we're going to try our best here because we're going to try our best here. So far for Illinois. Now, who knows if this has been updated with the tournament? We're going to do our best here. Luckily, it's broken down by Texas Tech and Illinois here. So we're going to try our best. So stick with me here. Okay. He has started 60 games for the Fighting Illini, 62 games total. His minutes has just gone insane. At Texas Tech, he averaged 25 minutes a game. Now he's averaging 33 minutes. Okay. For Illinois in two seasons, has scored 1,262 points. Now, I don't know if this is with the tournament or not. I think it is, but regardless if it is or isn't, his first year at Illinois, which was last year, he scored 534 points his very first year. This year, if it's with the tournament, has 728 points. So some of those totals I told you where it took them years, he has that many points in that time frame. Oh, but Steve, he wasn't at Illinois the whole time. Steve, he was at Texas Tech. Okay. I don't think it's far-fetched to say that if he came to Illinois right from the get-go, that he wouldn't have the same thing, because if you look at his Texas Tech points, they're not as good, but they're still decent. Like this is his fifth year playing. So, he's got 5 years. No, I'm talking about just Illinois stats. I'm not talking about any of that. He had 284 points as a freshman, 360 as a sophomore. Went down a little bit to 271, and then he gets to Illinois and it just shoots through the roof, right? So he scored, again, I got to repeat the number. So at Texas Tech, he scored, just so everybody knows, overall, if you take his Texas Tech points and his Illinois points, he has scored 2,177 points. That's a lot. Now, for Illinois, again, he scored 1,262 points, which is a lot. At Illinois so far, he is a 79% free throw shooter. I think that's the best free throw shooting percentage that I've said over these players. He shoots 34% from the three-point line. He shoots 56% from two. Overall, shoots 46%. That's pretty good, right? That's pretty good. He has 207 rebounds. Total rebounds is 270, so he does get some rebounds. He has 157 assists at Illinois, which is a lot. 42 blocks. He's forced 144 turnovers. So the argument here, if you look at stats, what he's done, taking Illinois to the March Madness last year in the tournament, taking them this year, led them to the Elite Eight, is averaging close to 25 to 30 points ever since the Big Ten tournament. I do think the argument is going to be made here that you have to put Terrence Shannon Jr. as one of the best Illinois players, if not the top, arguably one of the best Illinois players, right? From a statistical standpoint, for what he's meant to the team, he never comes out of the game. The amount that he can score. And when you watch film, he'll play defense. He'll get the rebounds. So I don't think this is totally far-fetched of a question that Cody asked last night, which got me thinking, this is a legitimate question to be had. And this is nothing against any of those guys that I mentioned. Those guys that I mentioned, yeah, we got a comment. Io is considered one of the best Illinois players as well. But it's not far-fetched to sit here and say, is Terrence Shannon Jr. even better than Io DeSumo, right? Because I asked Cody the question on his YouTube channel last night. Is it arguably to say that Io was a better shooter, right? And Terrence is really good at driving to the lane. You look at the stats. We look back to the games. Io was a very good mid-range shooter. Io had ice in his veins. You want him to have the ball at the last second of the games. Now, that part could be made arguable about Terrence Shannon. Do you want him to have the ball at the end of the game? Terrence Shannon Jr. seems to be a better shooter than Io DeSumo, especially at three-point line. Io may be better at mid-range, but when you want to look at three-point line, Terrence Shannon Jr., right? Driving to the lane. you almost want to say Terrence Shannon Jr. because of his explosiveness. I'm not saying it's going to translate well to the NBA. Take NBA out of it. I don't want to talk about, well, look at Io and what he's doing in the NBA. I'm talking about while they're in college and what they're doing in college, right? None of these players are bad players, obviously. They're some of our favorite players of all time. But he has to be put into that argument, right? Has to be put into that argument. So I think he can be put up there. I think that they have to adjust the list when it's all said and done, that you have to put him in the top 5, then the argument has to start to come in, as he one of the best. And it sucks because nothing against D Brown. I'm trying to get D Brown on the podcast. He's up here in the Chicagoland area at Roosevelt. D Brown's considered one of the best Illinois players as well. And it's hard to say exactly who's the best. I can't really, because like D Brown, by the way, and we also got to look at eras and the rules and everything else, how they played and everything like that. What's this comment we got going on here? Terrence Shannon Jr. is bigger because he's getting the press, the university, the hip hop community, etc. Terrence Shannon Jr. is more box office than Io. I'll give you that. Are you talking about social media because Terrence Shannon is more outgoing? I mean, I don't know. That's a weird, I see where you're coming from, but like, what are you talking about, the hip hop community, et cetera? I don't understand any of that, what you're talking about there. No offense to what you're saying. I get what you're saying. But I don't know what that means. Like, what do you mean the media? He's in the media more because of the allegations, I guess, which, very careful how we put this. I don't think they would keep him on the team if things were bad, and I'll leave it at that. But social media is even bigger than when Io was. I mean, social media is big. It's big now. He's getting more press because they're going to the Elite Eight. So no offense to Io, they didn't do that while he was here. So obviously he's getting more press because he's going to the Elite Eight. I mean, so that comment, I don't know. The hip hop community, Io was in, Io kind of kept to himself. Maybe Terrence Shannon's more outgoing, maybe, I don't know. But ultimately, Terrence Shannon Jr., too, he seems to kind of keep to himself. You don't see him boasting about, and at least I don't. I mean, Coleman Hawkins probably boasts himself more than anybody else. But what do you mean by bigger? Like, he's bigger because of that? No, he plays very well. I just named you off the stats. And he plays very good defense, and he's very explosive. So, Io, like I said, this is not a bashing session of those other players. Those other players are some of the best Illinois players of all time. You keep them on the list. They will never go away. They brought so much to Illinois community, so much to Illinois school. I just think you have to put Terrence Shannon into the conversation with them now, which only been in Illinois for 2 years, I think should say something. But this is just some thoughts. This is just talking it through. I do think you have to kind of slide him into the conversation with D Brown and Darren Williams, James Augustine, Io DeSumo. And it's kind of cool to look back at their stats and really talk about what they did for Illinois. Like, James Augustine was one of my favorite players, and I totally forgot that as a freshman, he still made an impact. Like, sometimes as freshmen, they don't make as big as impact as others. And so it's really cool to go back and look at that, look at D Browns, so it's kind of cool to look at that. And there's so many other players that I did not even bring up. These were just some of the ones to talk about, right? There's so many other players we could have brought up, but those were just the first ones that pop into your head. He has a Joe Morant, Ant Edwards appeal. I'm not even going to put the comment up. I appreciate you watching it, but I'm not going to put that up because I don't understand what it means. I don't get it. What do you mean? Who cares? Seems like a good person. Brad Underwood wouldn't bring Terrence Shannon in if he wasn't a good person. So I don't understand that comment. But I appreciate you putting the comment there, but I don't understand what that means. And I'm sorry that I don't understand what it means. I'm a dumb country boy. I don't understand what it means. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on the UConn game, Illinois game. Start having the conversation about Terrence Shannon being put into the conversations with D Brown and Darren Williams and Io DeSumo as one of the best Illinois players of all time. Not saying he is. You just put him into that conversation. But yeah, so that's this. Everybody enjoy the game tonight. Hopefully, we are talking about Illinois getting to the Final Four for the first time since the 2004-2005 season. So that would be a great thing to happen for Illinois fandom. So enjoy the games today. Enjoy that game tonight. Thank God it's not as late as it was before. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow right on Apple and iTunes and Spotify. X is Coach_Steve72 and the Coach Steve Show on X. Instagram, Coach Steve72, the Coach Steve Show on Instagram as well. TikTok, Coach Steve72 on TikTok. Yes, TikTok. We're trying to get that more videos up there, I suppose. So check all that out. Check out all the affiliate description below as well. Check out all the other episodes as well. Thank you guys for watching and or listening. We'll see you guys on the next one.